औज़ुबिल्लाहिमिनश्शैतानिर्रजीम बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम। ख़ातिन व हज़रात, आज हम CPDI की जानिब से हमारी वेलनेस टॉक की जो सीरीज़ है उसमें एक नई एपिसोड के साथ आपके साथ मौजूद हैं। इससे पहले एक हमने एपिसोड की जो न्यूट्रिशन के हवाले से थी, उसमें हमने तज़किरा किया था कि पाकिस्तान के अंदर एक और प्रॉब्लम जो है जिसकी तरफ हमारी बिल्कुल तवज्जो नहीं है, वो है 60 साल और इससे ज़्यादा उम्र के लोगों की सेहत के मुतालिक। आज हम जिस मौजू पे बात करेंगे वो एजिंग पॉपुलेशन है। ह्यूमंस ने जब भी किसी एक मसले को हल करने की कोशिश की है तो उसके साथ एक दो मसाइल और निकल आते हैं, तो उसको फिर हम मज़ीद हल करने की कोशिश करते हैं। जब हमने ज़िंदगी को लंबा करने की बात की कि ह्यूमंस शुड लिव लॉन्गर, then we perhaps created another problem that people are not able to live healthy lives. लेकिन उस प्रॉब्लम को रिजॉल्व करने की भी ह्यूमंस ने कोशिश की। Now we think that people should not only live longer but they should also live healthy lives, और एक वेल फुलफिलिंग लाइफ हो और उसकी एक फ्लोरिशिंग लाइफ जो है वो कंटिन्यू करे इस पूरे स्पेक्ट्रम के साथ जब तक ह्यूमन जिंदा हैं। आज हम जिस मौजू पे बात करेंगे वो डिटर्मिनेंट्स हैं, वो क्या वजूहात हैं, ये क्या तरीक़ाकार है जिस पे हम एल्डरली हेल्थ केयर को बेहतर कर सकते हैं। एंड वी आर वेरी फॉर्चुनेट टू हैव Dr. Basma Ellahi. She is a public health nutritionist and she is associated with the University of Chester, and she is an expert on elderly health care, and she will talk about the determinants of better elderly health, how diets, lifestyles are associated with these problems, and how can we modify diets and lifestyles to have better aging in Pakistan and also in the UK. Dr. Sabat, thank you very much for joining us. With this context that we have just talked about, what is your opinion that how we can have better aging portfolio and the prospects of elderly people in Pakistan in a better way? How can we have this?
So if you don't mind, I'm just going to take you back to some key public health principles and principles that are about life course nutrition. So I wanted to just share with you the parable of the river. So you're standing at the side of the river, you're a clinician, and people are falling in and drowning, and you're so busy jumping in, rescuing those people, time and time again, you're working on that rescuing of people because more and more people are drowning. You're so busy that you're not able to even think what is going on further up in the stream, why people are falling in. So it could have been that the bridge was broken or people were not educated not to get too close to the river edge. Nutrition is like that. If we don't look at the upstream things such as the core education, what's happening in the early stages of life, also policy and the role, the professional role of nutritionists and dietitians in this space, we're not going to be able to prevent all those people from drowning. And that's a huge burden, not just on families who have to carry the burden of the healthcare costs, but also the health system. We're never going to be able to employ enough dietitians, enough clinicians, enough nutritionists to keep solving the problem, so we need to prevent the problem. So then I'm going to come to the concept of aging. What we eat in our former years, in fact, even the evidence is that pre-conceptual nutrition is absolutely key for the health outcomes of the child that is born to that mother. So if we don't focus on the upstream, we're never going to be able to have good health in our later years, or we develop bad habits and we predispose ourselves to some of those conditions that we know are appearing. And that goes back to some scientific evidence that we've collected over years called the Barker's hypothesis of fetal programming. So the science, the evidence is there to underpin all of what we're suggesting in nutrition. We don't just make it up. We're very much trained to look at the evidence, to see that the evidence is collected robustly, and then translate that into things people can apply in their everyday lives. So for me, that is the main fundamental principle and role and need for nutritionists and dietitians, not only in Pakistan but globally, because nobody else understands that evidence base and can translate it for public in the way that nutritionists and dietitians are trained to do that. So in many countries, you'll see that role very much emphasised. I myself am a registered nutritionist in the UK with the Association for Nutrition, and we work within a code of conduct and a framework within which we give any advice, because actually we have a professional responsibility to use the evidence base in the correct way. So you come back to this concept of healthy aging. So even as we get older, it's not too late to change our diet. We can really improve our health outcomes. For example, we may go to the GP, they may diagnose us with pre-diabetes. That's a really early indicator. If we can at that stage change our habits, change our diet, change our levels of physical activity, start to increase those, so that, because we know that physical activity can make a big difference on the outcome around diabetes and diabetes prevention. So we really need to get into that, instead of sitting there and saying, oh, I went to the GP and the GP said I've got pre-diabetes and I need to change my diet. You need to be really very quickly speaking to a nutritionist, a dietitian. They can advise around the small changes. We're not looking for huge changes. Nobody can make huge changes. Fad diets don't work. We need long-term changes, and that's why I keep going back to prevention, embedding these key principles in everyday healthy habits, so that actually then those changes are much easier to make, but also we're preventing those diseases. It is not an inevitable consequence of aging that we should be sick. We shouldn't be getting these diseases. We can prevent them at a very early stage. Physical activity and dietary changes, moving closer to a diet that's got more fruits and vegetables, higher content in terms of fibre, and also as we age to be keeping an eye on the protein content, because what we don't want is muscle wasting. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah, no, please continue.
So the other third component I would always emphasise, and because it's becoming more and more important, is looking after our mental well-being. So mindfulness, being able to manage our emotions, but just looking after our mental health being as we get older, not leaving older people to not be part of that family, but to be included in that family. When we do some work with our clinicians, when we come out here, we ask them about the concept of aging in Pakistan. We did that recently at the PNDS workshop that was sponsored by the Nutrition Society UK. And people's concept of elderly is that they need taken care of, that they're infirmed, that they actually are very fragile. Actually, that's not the scenario we want to aim for. We want healthy individuals who are an important part of the decision making around their own lives and their family lives.
एक हमारे के ऊपर वाले कर रहे हैं ये ऊपर
वाले okay. So that's it in a nutshell. We just need to make sure that we're not seeing elderly or older people as people who should be completely pampered. They should be an active part of the family. There's no reason why they can't take regular walks. There's no reason why they can't change that diet if we help them and enable them to do that. And this is where the role of the nutritionist and dietitian is really important, because they can help you to make small changes, small adjustments that can improve health and well-being in a really big way. Because as long as those things are sustained, we'll see an overall improvement over a period of time. If we're looking for doing something today, like a medicine, do something today, we'll get that result tomorrow. We're not going to have that when it comes to nutrition. We have to develop those longer term habits.
So Dr. Basma, what we are saying is that we have perhaps erroneously linked aging with disease and infirmity. So if we can take care of the diets and lifestyles, we can prevent cognitive decline to a considerable extent, and we can also prevent infirmity in the longer term. So this is
absolutely, and there's
the key message.
Absolutely, and there's much research going on. I myself am involved in a project that's funded by the National Institute of Health Research in the UK, and we're looking at the connection between the diet that South Asian people eat and long-term conditions, multiple long-term conditions such as dementia, arthritis, osteoporosis, etc. These diseases are also diseases of inflammation, and so those diseases are what we're now trying to prevent with the long term. And what we know is that, again, the basics of what is a healthy diet, high in fruits and vegetables and fibre, and an adequate amount of protein, but lower in the energy-dense foods. But by having all those fruits and vegetables and that variety, we're making sure we're getting our micronutrients. We can prevent some of those diseases of decline.
So what I'm trying to understand from you is that perhaps aging does not mean that every person who is crossing the age of 60 has to be dependent upon others. Yes. They can still manage their lives. Yes. This is possible. Absolutely,
and they should still manage to stay physically active, because muscle wastage occurs when we sit around and do very little. And so what happens is somebody might look fairly healthy, they might even be a bit overweight or even obese, but their muscle is wasting. So we have what we call sarcopenic obesity occurring within populations. And we've seen that in the UK and elsewhere. And I'm sure if we had the research funds to look at this in Pakistan, we would also see that here. Early indications are just this hand grip test that we use, and that shows we've seen a decline in a piece of research that we've been doing with Umera Siddiqui from the University of Lahore. She's shown that actually that muscle function declines with age. And so we can prevent that through some activities that we do. Just even that hand grip strength, just always, using your hands in that way. Because what happens is when you have daughter-in-laws, when you have extended family structures, people stop doing the things around the house that they may have done when they were younger, because that's left then to the younger generation. But actually, I think the younger generation have a really important role here. They can help people maintain that physical activity, take people for walks, encourage people to do a small amount of weight-bearing exercise to keep that muscle mass intact. Because once we lose that, that's when we become unable to sit and stand quickly from a chair. And those general everyday functional activities, and they result in a deterioration of our health. And as a consequence, people then have this image of an older, infirmed person who's fragile and at risk of fall. Because we don't want people to fall, we pamper them. But actually, if we encourage them to maintain some muscle strength and to develop that, if they have lost it, you can easily redevelop that, then at least they can stop themselves from falling, because we can't 24/7 be with somebody. And actually, it's the falls that put people at risk of some of those other diseases that you've talked about.
So as a public policy professional, what I can guess, I can perhaps try to understand from your talk, is that managing this problem of aging or unhealthy aging is not really very expensive. What you are saying is that most of the interventions are non-pharma, and it does not require a lot of scientific knowledge at the point of healthcare provision. So you can perhaps, just with a twist of training and capacity at the primary healthcare levels, you can manage aging of unhealthy aging in a better way, and you can have better health outcomes, and you can keep Pakistani population in a good shape to play their role in society and be functional, and not only taking care of themselves, but perhaps be part of the society as well. This is a good news from your talk.
Absolutely, and I think that's why my emphasis on younger people is important, because in our own research in the UK, when we looked at Pakistani families, what we found was where a Pakistani family had an educated person, that person was influencing positively the diet that the older person was having. We saw much healthier food portions, we saw more salad, more vegetables incorporated into the diet. Where there was less education in those families, what we saw was the traditional Asian diet that was high in fat, high in sugar, and high, generally overall high in calories, and not giving us the key nutrients that we need for sustaining a healthy life and prevention of some of those diseases of older age.
Thank you very much, Dr. Basma. Thank you very much for being with us, and you shed light on a number of very important critical points. And for us, Pakistan as a less developed economy, I think a very important lesson from your talk is that healthy aging is possible with right kind of policies and interventions, and perhaps community-led approaches. We can by providing better healthcare services at the primary healthcare levels, we can manage our aging population in a better way and keep their participation in society in a good form.
Absolutely.
I think
Absolutely.
This is the
and if you don't mind me saying that the schools have a big responsibility here. So in the UK, we have nutrition on the school curriculum. In Africa, we've just done a piece of work where we've written some school curriculum, and we're going to cascade that to the training of teachers. What are we training our teachers in? If we're not teaching them in the core principles of nutrition and food, then how are they going to educate the next generation? And I'd like to see a big focus on this. I'd like to see nutritionists and dietitians from PNDS involved in this work, because actually they have the scientific training to be able to do that, but coupled with the skill of the art of communication. Public health nutrition is the science and art of improving health through the medium of nutrition, and they are best placed to do that.
Thank you very much. It means that the traditional concept or the way we look at that perhaps aging, disease, hospital dependency, this is the connection. We can actually break this connection and we can keep our population healthy, cognitively active, functionally active, functionally agile, and keep playing a good role. Thank you very much. خواتین و حضرات, آج ہم نے جس موضوع پہ بات کی وہ بڑھتی عمر کے ساتھ جو ہمارے مسائل ہیں ان کے حل کے اوپر ہے. سب سے اچھی خبر اس میں یہ تھی جو ہم نے ڈاکٹر صاحبہ سے بات کی, وہ یہ کہ بڑھاپے کا تعلق ضروری نہیں ہے کہ آپ بیماری کی شکل میں آپ کے سامنے آئے. یہ نہیں ہے کہ آپ کی دماغ کی صلاحیت جو ہے کم ہو جائے اور جسمانی صلاحیت کم ہو جائے. اگر آپ کی خوراک اچھی ہے, آپ کے لائف سٹائل اچھے ہیں, تو آپ اپنی عمر کے آخری حصے میں بھی 70, 80, 90 سال کی عمر میں بھی ایک اچھی زندگی گزار سکتے ہیں. سوال صرف یہ ہے کہ کیا ہم بحیثیت معاشرہ اور اس ملک کے اندر وہ پبلک پالیسیز لے کے آ سکتے ہیں. کیا ہم چاہتے ہیں کہ ہم اپنی بنیادی صحت کے مراکز میں بوڑھوں کی صحت کے حوالے سے, بوڑھوں کو جو 60 سال سے اوپر کی جو پاپولیشن ہے ان کو ایک فعال اور متحرک رکن کے طور پہ ایکسیپٹ کریں, اور ان سے ان کی زندگی کا نچوڑ جو انہوں نے کئی دہائیوں میں تجربات زندگی کے حاصل کیے, ان تمام کو ہم استعمال کریں, اور وہ اپنی نئی نسل کو ٹرین بھی کر رہے ہوں مختلف چیزوں میں. تو میرا یہ خیال ہے کہ یہ ایک بہت اہم موضوع ہے. اس پہ ہم مزید بھی ڈاکٹر صاحبہ سے بات کریں گے. جیسے ہی وقت ملے گا ہم مزید اس پہ گفتگو جاری رکھیں گے, اور سی پی ڈی آئی کے پلیٹ فارم سے ہم آپ کے سامنے ایلڈرلی کیئر کے حوالے سے اور ویلنس کے حوالے سے بات چیت جاری رکھیں گے. اگر آپ کو ہمارا یہ پروگرام اچھا لگا ہے, آپ کو یہ گفتگو اچھی لگی, آپ سبسکرائب کیجئے گا, لائک کا بٹن دبائیے, اور اگر کچھ کامنٹ ہے, کوئی سوال پوچھنا چاہتے ہیں تو کامنٹ سیکشن میں ضرور اس کا تذکرہ کیجئے. ہم کوشش کریں گے کہ ان سوالوں کا جواب ہم آپ تک پہنچائیں. بہت شکریہ. تھینک یو ویری مچ.
Thank you, sir.